Hey everyone, it's Miss Stefan, and I'm back with part 2 of your lesson. The first Neptune one, we had just finished that guided reading, and we took some time to jot down all of the key details, the important facts that we learned about Neptune. And so I ended the video so I could now take some time for us to pull up the text that we read on Monday, Earth, No Place Like Home, and that we could actually go back through here and jot down and type out all of the important details that we learned about Earth. And again, we're doing all of this in preparation for the activity where we're going to compare and contrast the two planets. So I'm not going to actually reread it with you. I know you've already taken the time to do the guided reading, to listen to the video I made, and then you did the second read where you read on your own. So now this third time, we're just going to go back through and just scan the text and scan the pictures and look for those important details. And I know you guys have been working on your quick summaries and some people have been sending to me. So if you already have your notes that you took in your summary, you could just pull that out. And if not, you could really quickly, just like you did for Neptune, you could go ahead and make a really simple graphic organizer, facts about Earth. And again, on your paper, you just have space below to jot those down. Okay. So the first thing we learned is that Earth is the only planet where plants and animals are able to live. I'm going to put that down as my first fact. Fact 1, Earth is the only planet where plants, animals, and people live. We could say where organisms live, right? So if we want to incorporate some other science vocabulary. We also learned in this diagram here that Earth is the third planet from the sun. And it's also pretty close to the sun. It's the perfect distance to sustain life and to support life, right? It's close enough that the water is in liquid form and it's not freezing, but it's far away enough that things aren't just burning and turning, like rocks, for example, turning into liquid and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and add that it's the third planet from the sun. I'm going to add in that thinking I had. So something that's important with text evidence, you want to capture exactly what the author says as your evidence, because again, it's an informational text, so these are facts. But like I was saying at the end of our Neptune graphic organizer, sometimes as you get into these more difficult texts, you have to make inferences. You have to kind of read between the lines and be a detective and think about what the author's trying to make you think about. Okay? And so we know that that's kind of the perfect distance for supporting life. So that's connecting fact 2 to fact 1. I'm just making that inference and thinking about that connection as I'm reading. As I look on, I see that Earth moves around the sun, and 1 year takes 365 days. This is kind of interesting. I know that Neptune also orbits around the sun. And remember that 365 days, that's what makes 1 year. Okay, one trip around the sun is 1 year. And just to think, if Neptune is much farther from the sun, do you think it's going to take a longer amount of time for it to orbit around the sun, or a shorter amount of time for it to orbit around the sun? What do you think? Okay, the closer the planet is to the sun, the faster the trip around the sun will take. The farther it is, the longer that trip will take. Okay, so already I'm kind of thinking about my things for my contrast list. Okay, Heat and light are traveling from the sun to earth. We know there's daytime and nighttime. I know that I included this in my key details for my summary. I know this is super important evidence that we need, but I don't know how helpful this is or if it's something really different than what we've already captured in our graphic organizer, and if our goal is in comparing and contrasting Earth and Neptune, right? We might just want to stick to those really important details where we can see similarities and differences, right? So we already know it's the third planet from the sun. I might want to add here, again, my thinking that it is the perfect distance to support life. As you're getting into your inferences. And that's shown here in the picture. The heat and light is traveling to the earth during the daytime and providing energy for the plants to produce their own food, keeping everything a comfortable temperature, but again, not getting too hot or too cold. Okay. Many kinds of animals and plants live on Earth, and they need the sun's warmth and light to live and grow. We know that. That was something we included in our summaries on Monday. We know that's very important. And we've already captured that idea in our first fact and actually in our second one. So we know we don't really need to take the time to write that again. And again, if you notice, we're moving much more quickly through the Earth book. It's because you've already taken the time. You've done a guided reading. You were looking really deep into this book. You've done the second reading on your own. So the third time around, you already are kind of an expert on Earth. So now you're just taking that information and using it for our goal of comparing and contrasting. Here we look at how oceans cover most of Earth. And this is the only planet with liquid water. This is very, very important. It makes Earth unique. It makes Earth different and special compared to all the other planets. So right away in my head, I know as I'm thinking that's something that's very different between Neptune and Earth. So I'm going to actually go back to my graphic organizer. It's going to be my fact 4. Earth is the only planet with liquid water. And, right, I'm going to connect that to a thought that I know from my background knowledge. I know that all animals, plants, and life need water to live, okay? And all life needs liquid water to live. The reason I'm making a point to say liquid water instead of just water is because when you're thinking back to all the planets that we've read about so far, last week we actually read about Mars, and we learned that Mars has water, however, it's frozen because Mars is a little bit farther from the sun. So while it has water and can potentially, that means it may be able to support life, right now that water is not in liquid form, so it doesn't have the water that plants and animals and organisms need to live. Okay. Then we know the rest is covered by land. Let me look at this part where I learned about oxygen and other gases that surround the Earth. Animals and people breathe in oxygen to live. I remember in the Neptune book hearing something about gases. Who remembers what was so special and unique about the gases on Neptune? Take a minute to think. Or look back in your notes. Okay? We learned that people cannot live on Neptune because it is covered with poisonous gases. Okay? Those poisonous gases are actually what makes Neptune blue. So this is very, very different. Earth has the right gases for people to live, including that most important gas of oxygen, which humans need in order to breathe and live. Plants as well. So let's add that. Okay. Sorry, it's taking me up here because I ran out of space, and that's okay. Fact 5. Earth has oxygen. And if you see, I'm taking that right from the text. And then again, I'm thinking about those inferences where I'm reading beyond the text a little bit, including some of my own thinking and putting together background information I've learned in this whole unit that I've been studying the planets in the solar system. And I know that oxygen is is an important gas for people to live. Right? People and organisms need oxygen to live. Okay? I'm going to add another row down here because we have a lot of facts that we're learning about. Okay. So we know that scientists are sending spacecraft into space, but if you remember, our goal right now is just to compare these two planets together, and we know on Earth we don't need to send spacecraft. We talked about that in the last video. So that's not really a piece of evidence that I need to include in this graphic organizer. We're just looking for the most important details, the most important evidence that allows us to compare and contrast Earth and Neptune. So that's very interesting, but it's not one of the important details or key pieces of evidence that I need to include. Okay. So that's everything. And then remember at the end, it just shows us some of our important points that we learned about Earth, extreme Earth facts, and our glossary. But again, we already went through all of this before, and we already captured our very important key details about planet Earth.